Hi, everyone. I know this is going to be a bit different than my usual, and intentionally so, but I have my reasons for it, and I want to explain a little bit. Well, first of all, what I'm going to be doing here is listening to Taylor Swift's new album straight through. And you might be thinking, oh, wait, where did this go? Have we just veered off track? Have we just leaped light years ahead? What is going on? Well, I'll tell you what's going on. First of all, I've had this idea in my mind for quite some time now, kind of developing because of how I hear many of you talking about your experiences hearing an album for the first time back in the day. And when an album was released, some of you spent all your allowance, monthly allowance on purchasing a recording. Some of you walked or took the bus to the record store, and it was a big deal. Well, I'm from a different era. I don't have record stores. We don't really go to record stores to find music. And also, I'm from a different musical background where, okay, yes, we try to stay up, we stay up with, the new artists, the new performers, the new composers, but it's a bit different than what I hear you describing about, let's say, when the Beatles' Rubber Soul album first came out, or something like that, or Pink Floyd's The Wall album, and the impact that putting it on the turntable for the first time and sitting back and listening to the whole thing, only getting up to flip the vinyl when it gets halfway, when one side completes. It's an experience that I suppose I will never be able to recreate for myself exactly as you experienced it, because it's such a different world now. But at the same time, I've had this idea. I should listen to a recent album release by a current artist who is significantly popular and just listen all the way through, kind of recreating the same scenario as best I can, just for the sake of the experience. Well, that's reason number one. Number two, this whole idea about Taylor Swift came up because just not too many days ago, I woke up, I scanned through the news one morning, and I saw Taylor Swift's name in the headlines. And I thought, okay, I've done a first listen to one of her pieces. What's going on with her? And turns out she released this double album at 2 a.m., something like that. And it was an instant success. I don't think you can even say it was an overnight success, because it didn't even take overnight for it to, basically as soon as it was released, everybody was on it. And its release has been bigger than practically anything before. It's really incredible as I was reading about it. And I decided this would be a good one for me to make this experience about, because it seems to be very, very relevant, very popular, very attractive to such a vast audience. It's more than me just trying to jump on the bandwagon and respond to all the hype around it. It's more about, I would like to see what it is that attracts and means so much to so many people. Why do they gravitate towards this music? And what are they gravitating towards? Because when you look at what a generation or an audience wants to consume, is consuming, it can tell you a lot about that audience or that group. And it's going to be interesting for me because, I'm a bit of a cultural outlier. This is going to be a unique experience. So that is kind of the background about why I am sitting down to do this project in the middle of everything else that I have going on. I have a little bit of an intro to read here. The Tortured Poets Department is the 11th album by Taylor Swift, self-described as her lifeline album. The Tortured Poets Department was perceived by Swift as a culmination of imperative songwriting. Well, those are some interesting concepts there. It is a double album, with the second part, subtitled The Anthology, surprise released 2 hours after the first. That I read about in the news, that she released an album, and then just 2 hours later, she released a completely unannounced album, and it shocked everybody. And it had such a big impact. And I was thinking, okay, clearly Taylor Swift is big enough to be able to put all the work into creating a whole album, not say a word about it, and know that when she puts it out, everyone's going to go mad. But why? I guess we'll find out. A synth-pop album with rock and folk stylings, its mid-tempo production is driven by synthesizers and drum machines, alongside live instruments such as piano and guitar. Its subject matter explores Swift's psyche and examines her public and private lives, blending sorrow and humor in a self-aware approach. And this idea of this being such a personal project that Taylor Swift has kind of put herself into this in a way that I gather from this that I'm reading now and from the news article I read, it seems like it's a very important project for her. And this idea that, well, it's perceived by Swift as a culmination of imperative songwriting. Isn't she kind of young still? She has quite a lifetime ahead of her. So it's interesting to see her now at this point in her career producing something that feels so culminative, so cumulative, so significant of her in terms of her life's work, and that she's looking at herself in that way at this point in her career. That's an interesting little thing to notice about this. The album broke a string of commercial records in various countries. Globally, it gained the highest single-day streams for an album previously held by another album of Taylor Swift, as well as the highest first-week stream for an album on the streaming platform Spotify. In the United States, it sold more vinyl LPs in a week than any other album in the SoundScan era. Vinyl LPs. And I know this is kind of a trend, you know? In recent years, it has become more popular again to produce some vinyls and for people to purchase vinyls. There is something about the sound quality of a vinyl, and I know this as a classical musician, and we have this discussion among ourselves. The sound quality on a vinyl is so different and so much richer and more complex than what we hear in a typical CD or MP3 recording. Elsewhere, Swift recorded the largest streaming day for an album and artist in German history, with 11.5 million and 14.4 million streams respectively. In the UK, the Tortured Poets Department sold 220,000 units in its first 3 days, becoming the fastest-selling album of 2024 and surpassing Midnight's first-week sales figures to become the fastest-selling album of Swift's career. Basically, she's at the top. You know, in a way, I want to say, what a businesswoman. In China, the Tortured Poets Department set the record for most streamed album by a foreign artist in a single day on NetEase Cloud Music. This is a big deal, at least in terms of marketing. Now, of course, none of this says anything about the musical content, whether it's such a big deal as the streaming and the purchase numbers and all of this. But that's what I'm about to find out, is what is this music that she's producing, and how does it feel to me at this moment? All right, starting with this first song, we have Fortnight. It's interesting that for the first track of the entire album, we basically dove straight into the verse. Not much instrumental. I could even say there's no introduction. There were a few little synth sounds, right? And then right into it. And I remember from listening to the first piece I ever heard by Taylor Swift some time ago. Let's see, that was called
All Too Well.
All Too Well. All Too Well. And reading what I did about her at that time, she's kind of recognized for her poetry and her lyric writing, and it seems that this is really pushing us towards attention on the story, the lyrics, what she's recounting, and not so much about the music, because we basically have just bing, 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 bing. The other thing I noticed is that the drum didn't come in until 4 lines after the music began. It was the bass, bing, 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 which set up the rhythmic pulse of the piece. So we could say that there's not much happening in the music, couldn't we? I mean, it's the same bass line repeated over and over, and hardly even in any instrumental backing. It's all about her voice, her voice, her voice, her voice, and that's the center of it. But of course, we can't call this speech. It is musical in some way, and the music is doing something. And what is it? Because it's not really about the chord progression or the bass line or the instruments. It's about the way the melody that she's singing. It's not even about melody per se, but it is about the rhythm of the melody. In that sense, we could say it's like speech, but I'm noticing what's happening in the chorus, in the refrain, where in the verse, we have her singing the lines fairly traditionally, we could say. And then when we get to the chorus, it changes a bit. The rhythm changes. The breaks, the breath points happen in, we could say, awkward or non-speech pattern places. And then some of the phrases run end to end without a break. I'm listening. I'm noticing. Now you're in my backyard. Turned into good neighbors, your wife waters flowers. Those two phrases, turned into good neighbors, your wife waters flowers. It's building a sort of tension, a sort of, in a way, a kind of moving towards a climax of sorts, an intensification of sorts. And so this line, I want to kill her, stands out a lot, because right after that kind of increasing in the pace and the flow, we have this big gap, and then I want to kill her. It's set on its own. And it's interesting reading through the lyrics and listening to the music at the same time, because the way she sings it is not exactly the way it's lined out line by line poetically. And that helps to make us notice really what she's doing here. That's an interesting study in pacing and breaking lines of text musically. And well, I'm not going to make any judgments on it, good or bad, at the moment, because I have a ways to go through this album. So let's move on to the next one. And the next one is The Tortured Poets Department. I guess this is the title track, right? But it's not the first track. Drums first this time. Okay, I have to comment on this line, no effing buddy, which is coming back here. And I guess this stands out to me because I'm imagining what might somebody 30, 50 years before now, 60 years before now, what band or artist, how would they have set that line if they want to use that sort of crude language for emphasis? Because clearly there's no reason to put that in there except that she's repeating this nobody, nobody, and she's wanting to emphasize no effing buddy, right? So what is happening in the music as she's emphasizing and trying to pound this into you that nobody is going, nothing different is changing, and it gives a very, very modern vibe because it begins to feel like this type of language has become meaningless in a sense. In other words, we don't even stop to think about whether it's coming out of our mouth as we're saying nobody, nobody, nobody. It doesn't impact the way that, at least when I think of it, it ought to, right? The whole point of saying an expression like that is to have an impact. But then here, this entire piece of music is rather impactless. There is, well, I haven't gotten to the end, right? So I need to withhold final judgment. But I'm getting the sense, the first track, now the second track, it has this kind of general flow and travel forwards, but the music is neither trying to paint the text, as I sometimes talk about, nor is it trying to emphasize and flow with the emotional and storytelling ups and downs of the text. It's doing neither one of those. It is simply the turning wheels under the bus. I feel like saying the wheels on the bus go round and round, round and round. And the question is, where is this bus going? And, well, I'll have to continue to see that, find out where it's going, if it's going anywhere. But I'm beginning to form the idea that it's not meant to go anywhere musically. As I said in the opening of the first one, it feels like this is really focused on the story. But even the way she's using the voice here in the recording, it also is simply traveling with the story. It's not giving me any musical, emotional contribution to the story. It is simply the page on which the story is written. And that's an interesting thing for me to see, because I begin to suspect that perhaps the entire album could be like this. I don't know. We'll find out. But if that's the case, then it brings up an interesting question of what is the attraction and how is it that we might find ourselves drawn to this. So anyway, those are some ideas that I'm going to have to explore as we continue. I guess that's my favorite line so far. You left your typewriter at my apartment, straight from the tortured poets department. Well, that's how this started. And then the line, who else decodes you? It's been all about who's going to hold you, who's going to hold you. But now, who else decodes you? What a line with the imagery of a typewriter, and you left it, and all of this. Who else decodes you? I kind of like that line. Track number 3, My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys. This also begins to feel a bit dark and tortured. Well, tortured poets department, right? But when I heard the line tortured poets department, I had the idea that this was more about internal, psychological, personal turmoil. Instead, it seems to be more relationship focused, at least so far.
Oh, here we go.
That line, I felt more when we played pretend than with all the Kens. That's from the Barbie movie from last year, isn't it? Okay, no comment on that, but let's continue. Actually, I'm not going to comment on that movie. This, I said from the beginning, and I'm going to say again, this is about the storytelling. This is about the lyrical content. And as I'm listening to this rather tortured picture of an unhealthy relationship developing, and there's this sort of awareness of you know, I know I'm in a bad relationship. I know this is not healthy, and yet who else is going to hold you? Who else is going to hold me? I feel more with him than with any of the Kens. He stole my tortured heart. Left all the, you know, all of this that's coming out here. It is putting in mind a movie, which is full of this kind of conflict and awareness, and at the same time denial. And that is Sophie's Choice. And of course, that's a different context, a different world, a different level of torturedness. But so much of what I'm hearing here is bringing the same sort of scenario to my imagination. Okay, moving on to track 4. And track 4 is Down Bad. Notice how it's just her voice. In fact, we could just say it's her naked voice here. Everything disappears. Well, as I said, there's not a lot behind it. But in this moment, did you take all my old clothes just to leave me here naked and alone? Listen how everything just kind of leaves her voice naked there in that moment.
Did you take all?
I guess that one to me was a little bit more interesting in its setup and the way that she has used little elements of musical expressive qualities here, there, back when the line came. I guess it was I think for a moment I knew Cosmic Love. Perhaps that was it. No, it wasn't. Anyway, there are places where just a little instrumental touch kind of shifts the color or the emphasis or the meaning of one word in a line, and still she's singing vocally kind of the same style all the way through, round and round and round and round. But this one had a little bit more meat in its rhythmic and emphatic elements. And that was a bit more interesting to listen to for my ears. And now, number 5, So Long, London. London. Somehow I didn't imagine that we were in London. This is interesting. Okay, and now this one is engaging me in the text, in the lyrics, because, well, you heard me say, I didn't know this had anything, I didn't know we were in London, right? Well, now this is being played with in here. It's not obviously speaking of a place. It's almost as if it's a person, him, who is London. And it's talking about carrying him after probably a drowning incident or something. Is this him? Is this London? And the tragedy, so long, London, then you'll find someone. And then I didn't opt in to be your odd man out. I founded the club she's heard great things about. And about this time we start to think, wait a minute, is this London a person, or is this entire song, is this entire bit of poetry about a place, London, in the form of a person? And how is represented by a person, and how is this all fitting together, or who is this him? And then just as we start to realize, oh, this is getting a bit intriguing, I left all I knew, you left me at the house by the heath. Well, again, that puts us over in the UK somewhere, Great Britain, with the heath by the sea or somewhere like that. And then I stopped CPR after all, back to this reviving of, and then the spirit was gone. We would never come to. And I'm pissed off you let me give you all that youth for free. For so long, London. So now it's not so long, London, but I'm upset that you let me give away so much for such a long time. And so it's playing with this, not just this London, but this so long, for so long. And even this CPR and this rescue from drowning, and then suddenly the spirit was gone. We would never come to. This is really about a relationship with someone or something or some place, but it's not clear right away, and it kind of pulls you in and gets you engaged, and you start trying to unravel the mystery of it. Interesting poetic writing here, and I'm intrigued by it. Moving on to number 6, But Daddy, I Love Him. We're back to him. Probably that London was somehow about this conflicted relationship that we hear developing in each track up to this point. And this sounds like it may be yet another commentary or part of the story. So, this song really clears up the ambiguity of the previous one, doesn't it? This one kind of sets us back and says, no, this is about relationships. And this is about a love relationship or a passion relationship in which both lovers are crazy for each other, and yet they are bad for each other. They are hurtful to each other. And, you know, it's an old story that has happened so many times over and is going to happen so many times over again. I suppose a lot of people can relate to it, can't they? But this is the first song in the series where we really start to feel like she's coming out and saying, I choose this. I know it's bad for me. I know it hurts me. But I loved this line here where she said, if all you want is gray for me, after she spits her venom about the vipers in empaths' clothing, and God save the most judgmental creeps who say they want what's best for me, sanctimoniously performing soliloquies I'll never see. I mean, the you can feel the intensity of the loathing there in that line. And then if all you want is gray for me, then it's just white noise. And it's just my choice. There's a lot of people in town. Oh, and then you ain't gotta pray for me. Me and my wild boy and all this wild joy. It's this expression of he's hurting me. I've been singing all these songs about how he's hurting me and how we're bad for each other. But I choose this because this somehow brings color into my life, intensity into my life. There's a passion here. There's an attraction that lights up my world, even though it also destroys my world. And it's that conflict which, well, abusive relationships have that element so many times. But it's interesting to see her for the first time stepping up and saying, this is my choice to stay here. And don't mess with me, because I don't need your prayers. I don't need your sympathy. I don't need you trying to change this, change this heart that beats inside of me. This is an expression of passion and desire and commitment here.
It's just my choice.
And I couldn't quite make out what it was about. Now it makes sense. Screaming, but Daddy, I love him. I'm having his baby. No, I'm not. But you should see your faces. In other words, she's expressing that just to shock, to horrify, and to emphasize her choice. Doesn't mean that she's pregnant, but then she says, but you should see your faces. Oh, you should see your faces. When she says, I'm having his baby, and the look of horror and shock and, oh my goodness, this has gone too far, and now what do we do? This paints a great picture, doesn't it? Mostly to do with the lyrics, with the poetry. Not so much to do with the music, although it carried us along through it. Okay, moving on to the next one. Number 7, Fresh Out the Slammer. This is starting to feel like a kind of a small town scandal story and all the elements of it. Fresh Out the Slammer. Here we go. Actually being fresh out the slammer, or is this a symbolic representation of getting out of this relationship and returning to a different relationship? Or is she simply returning to this relationship once she's free again? Let's see what's going on in the next song, which is number 8, Florida.
You can beat the heat if you beat the charges.
So that is track number 8, and you can see that my interpretation, my understanding of the album is shifting and developing as I pass through each track. Some of them have been really engaging in the storyline. Others, some musical element has been something that interests me. This one was more about the voice, and it's the first time I've actually heard her putting much attention into changing the tone quality and the expressive elements within her voice within a song. The first several were almost so consistent that they could, even if you're looking for vocal expressivity, you might say it's really bland. Well, I commented on other things there which were taking the place of that. But I see that she's very, very specific in choosing one, maybe two elements within each song to really focus on. And it changes from one track to the next what that focal point is going to be. Sonically, musically, rhythmically, vocally, textually, all of this. It's interesting to see how she's handling and what she's choosing to present. And it feels very, very calculated and specific as we move along. Well, this is the halfway point of the first of the double album. And I guess this is where you would get up from your chair and flip the vinyl over and then put the needle back down to finish playing, right? So I feel like this is a good point, and I need to pause here and give myself some time for what I've heard so far to settle and make sure that I don't fall into a sort of autopilot approach for the second half of this album. And so I will come back and do the rest of it, and we will hear that tomorrow. This is going to be a special weekend event, so just hold on to your seats. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll finish the project together then. I'll see you soon.